Well, joining us now ahead of the US elections, an election which is being seen with bated breath, not just in America, but around the world. Allan Lichtman, he's an American historian. He's known as the presidential prophet or the election Nostradamus. He's got 10 of 11 elections right since when? 1984. He joins us now. Mr. Lichtman, wonderful to speak to you. Thank you very much for being with us here at NDTV. My first question, recent trends suggest a mixed picture, with some polls showing Kamala Harris leading or tied in several key states, while others indicate a close race or a slight lead for Donald Trump. What is your sense of where these elections are headed?
You should take all of these polls and do with them what the great philosopher David Hume said you should do to works of superstition. Consign them to the flames. They have no predictive value, and they're all well within the margin of error. In 2016, when I predicted Donald Trump, which did not make me very popular in 90% plus Democratic DC, where I teach at American University, all of the polls were going in the other direction. In fact, the most eminent compiler of polls, the Princeton University Consortium, gave Hillary Clinton a 99% chance of winning. That's why my keys to the White House are not dependent upon these horse race polls, but they look at the fundamentals that drive American presidential elections, that it's governing, not campaigning, that counts. And I've not changed my prediction since I issued it 2 months ago on September 5th.
Kamala Harris, right?
I predicted, yes, we're going to have Harris, a new path-breaking president, the first woman president, and the first president of mixed African and Asian descent, kind of foreshadowing where America's going. We're rapidly becoming a majority-minority country. Old white guys like me, we're on the decline.
You know, it's interesting. You did say that it's extremely close right now. I think everybody agrees on that one point, and that you're well within a margin of error. Are you certain that you're right? If there is a margin of error at play, some would suggest it could go either way.
I don't suggest it can go either way. My predictions are definitive. I can be proven right or wrong because I tell you who's going to win. And I've been right since I predicted Ronald Reagan's election in April 1982, nearly 3 years ahead of time, when 60% of Americans said he was too old to run again. And retrospectively, in development, I developed the keys in 1981 as a result of analyzing every election since the horse and buggy days of politics, the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. So the keys are incredibly robust. Could I be wrong? Of course. I'm a human being. Any human being can be wrong. It's always possible.
Sure.
That some so catastrophic could change 160 years of American history patterns, but I don't think so.
Mr. Lichtman, there's discussion around shifts in demographics like suburban voters, young voters, how issues like abortion might be influencing voter turnout and preference. Are there any shifts in voter demographics specifically which you favor, either Harris or Trump? I mean, you believe Harris. So do you believe that, Harris doing well in these elections or winning these elections is because of a shift in voter demographics?
I don't base my prediction on voter demographics. You cannot accurately predict an election by trying to break it down into individual voter groups. I use the analogy of your cup of tea. You pour sugar in it. You learn nothing by trying to follow the individual sugar molecules, but you can learn a lot from simple integral parameters like sweetness and density, and that's what the keys are all about. But let me say one thing about changing demographics. As I said, we are rapidly becoming a majority-minority country, and minorities are the base of the Democratic Party. That means Republicans are battling against the demographic trends in this country. They can't create more old white guys, but that's why they're so desperately trying to limit the votes, particularly the votes of minorities, through all of these lawsuits and new rules and regulations making it harder to vote. It's a rational, if reprehensible, political strategy.
While it's not directly mentioned, at least not too often, the presence of third-party candidates like Jill Stein or Cornel West could some suggest potentially split votes, especially if their support is significant in swing states. Would you suggest that, irrespective of which way these elections go, the presence of these third-party candidates could be significant?
I do have a third-party key, but no existing third-party candidates comes close. It's the one time I use polls, but I don't take them at face value. I count that only if a third-party candidate is polling at about 10%. None of them that are left are even close. And there's no way when a candidate's getting, 1 or 2% to figure out where their vote is going. The margin of error is catastrophically large.
In the context of a close election, immediate economic issues like inflation and employment are often cited as significant voter concerns, and so they should be, potentially influencing the slight shifts observed in some polls. Will the economy, in your mind, be the decider in these elections?
Absolutely not. I do have two economic keys, a short-term and long-term economic key, but that's only 2 of 13 keys. It's a big mistake to presume elections determined by the economy. If that was the case, Hillary Clinton should have won easily in 2016 because it's a very solid economy. Hubert Humphrey should have won in a landslide against Richard Nixon in 1968. The 1960s economy was one of the best in U.S. history. So while I do take the economy into account, I have 11 other keys. That's the beauty of my system. It doesn't turn on any one thing,
right,
but looks at the great variety of factors that turn elections.
Now, the close polls, could indicate that both campaigns are effectively targeting their bases and swing voters, with neither gaining a decisive edge through strategy alone. Is that your sense as well?
Yeah, my predictions do not depend upon campaign strategy, talking points, debates. Look, Hillary Clinton won all the debates in 2016, lost. John Kerry won the debates against that very bad debater, George W. Bush, in 2004, and still lost. So again, let me stress, I look at the fundamentals of how American presidential elections really work as votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party. And when it comes to issues, there's no way to figure that out. Yes, the economy may tilt slightly towards Trump, although that's greatly narrowed, but abortion rights, democracy, heavily tilts towards Harris. No way to know, by parsing out these issues, how it's going to turn out.
Trump faces various legal battles. How do these legal issues potentially impact his campaign efforts and his ability to govern should he win the election? Is that something that voters are thinking about, that there are legal problems over here? If Trump comes to power, how is he actually going to rule if there are so many cases going against him?
Well, if Trump comes to power, he's going to dismiss the federal cases that are against him. That would leave only the Georgia case, which is hanging by a thread. And he's made it crystal clear, if he gets power, he's going to govern as an authoritarian. He said he's going to use the military against his political opponents, who he dehumanized as vermin, said were worse than Kim Jong-un, who machine guns his political opponents. He said he'll be a dictator on day one to drill, drill, drill. Well, drilling doesn't take place in one day. It takes months and years. And no one who's been a dictator on day one has ever voluntarily relinquished power. And his model is the authoritarian Viktor Orban of Hungary, who snuffed out the political opposition, snuffed out the free press. And he's now protected, if he won, by the Supreme Court decision giving him very broad immunity for very widely defined official acts. If that decision had been in effect in the 1970s, Richard Nixon would have gotten away with Watergate, and our democracy would likely have died 50 years ago. It would be in great peril and might well die again if Trump wins and carries out all that he's indicated he's going to do. And the way democracies die and dictatorships take hold is when good people don't take seriously enough what a would-be authoritarian does and says.
A final question: with abortion rights at the forefront of many voters' minds, how do Kamala Harris's and Donald Trump's policies on reproductive rights potentially sway suburban women, young voters, those in swing states? And how significant do you believe that this issue is in potentially having a serious impact in determining election outcome? I take your point that, look, it's no one issue. So I take the point that perhaps it's not just reproductive issues, but how significant is this as one of the major factors?
Yeah, if I'm going to step outside my keys, okay, because I don't parse issues and look at it independently, I think it's of great importance. We have seen that the pro-choice side, the side of reproductive freedom, has won time and time again on abortion referenda in the states, including some deep red states like Kansas and Ohio. And so this is, for the Harris campaign, a front and center important issue. And if you're going to believe this new shock poll, by the way, you've probably seen it, that came out of Iowa, showing Harris ahead in, what should be a solidly red state of Iowa. The big message of that poll was Harris was ahead 20 points among women. And I have no doubt that reproductive rights plays into that lead. And if you then look at the early voting is dominated by women. These are very good signs for Harris.
Allan Lichtman, wonderful speaking to you. A final question. Do you ever track the Indian elections?
All right, final.
Do you track the Indian elections? I'm curious to know.
What's that?
Do you ever track the elections in India, the country I'm in right now? It's a fascinating process.
I love India. I've been there lecturing about the keys to the White House, and I've been asked whether the keys could apply to Indian elections. And my answer is, you can't just export the keys. But someone like you, who knows a lot about Indian history and politics, could use the methodology and insights of the keys to become the Allan Lichtman of India.
All right. Well, that would be quite a task. But thanks once again for being with us. Thanks very much indeed.
My great pleasure. Great interview. Take care.
Take care.